Hey, we read books. It's time to talk about what I read in July. The first book I read this month was The Problem with Forever by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I gave it a 3 out of 5. This was a YA book about a girl and a boy who grew up in foster care together, and he said that he would take care of her forever, and then they got separated, and then they met back later in life in high school, and she eventually could take care of herself. Yawn! I think I put this on here for last year's Goodreads. It was like a nominee, which I need to stop doing because they're never good. It was kind of boring. The second book I read was Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. So this is a semi-biography that was really interesting to read. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It definitely had some slower parts and some where is this going parts, but you know, it's a biography, so I can't be like, why didn't you do this better when you were a slave? Oh, white me. It was a pretty good story though about a woman who was a slave and she had children in slavery and she was trying to work her whole life to get them out, and eventually she succeeds and her story in getting there, and then she eventually went on and wrote this book about it, so it was pretty cool. I'm still reading The Presidents. Oh boy. They're getting really boring though, and I think I'm in a boring lull till Abraham Lincoln. So help me Jesus, because this was only the 9th president, which was William Henry Harrison. And the only one thing I knew about him before this was that he died in office after the inauguration, like a few months later, because he caught a cold when he was doing his speech. But he actually lived a pretty interesting life, and so I was really interested to see he fought in the War of 1812. He lived quite an interesting life until he became president. So it was kind of interesting to read about that, and I feel bad that he died, but he was quite old for the time when he did die, and he should not have been out in the cold. What were you doing, WHH? 3 out of 5. The next one is Songbook by Nick Hornby. My aunt lent this to me. Nick Hornby obviously wrote High Fidelity and About a Boy. And this book is just a really, it's pretty short, which helped with my goal. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Basically he goes through like 20 songs or so that really meant a lot to him, that still do mean a lot to him, and they're all types of songs, which was really cool. It wasn't just like one type of song. And then he does like little mini essays about the song and like what he remembers when he was listening to it, or why it means a lot to him, or the history of it. So kind of interesting. Some songs were more interesting than others, obviously depending on if I knew what they were. So it was more of like a personal bias on this one. The next book my dad lent to me, it's called How We Got to Now, 6 Innovations That Made the Modern World by Steven Johnson. This book was really cool. So like the book says, it's split into 6 parts, and each part talks about something that made humanity get to where it was today. So there's a chapter on the cold, basically refrigeration, you know, obviously electricity. It's a fairly interesting read, and it looked like a big book, but I actually finished it pretty quickly, and I think it's just because it was so interesting. So that's the first book that I read this month that surpassed 3 stars. It got a 4 out of 5. Yeah. The next book I read was When We Collided by Emery Lord. This was another Goodreads one, and I gave this a 4 out of 5, and I actually really liked it. So it dealt a lot with mental illness and bipolar disorder and depression and teenagers, and I loved that this wasn't like a book where these two people meet and they're together forever. It's literally when we collided, when we happened to meet this summer, and we're both going through something really difficult in our lives, and like how, I don't know, it was just a really good like human interest book, I guess. While still having that like YA love that I have. I loved the characters in this book. I thought it was a really good read. This next one was my favorite one I read this month. It was called The Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. So it goes back and forth in between this girl's time at high school and then her adult life, getting ready to do a documentary about something that happened in her high school when she went there. So your whole time you're leading up to like, what's this thing that's made this adult character so awful? She's the worst, and I love it. I was only disappointed that it was like mostly like a facade that she was kind of putting on, and she wasn't actually like the worst person in the world, because it had like tendencies of Gone Girl in it, like Amy Gone Girl, and I was like, yes, give me that messed up character that's just so fucked up. I like that. So unfortunately it was more just like a defense mechanism, but it was still a really good read. It's the one I couldn't put down this month, and I was dying to know how it all ended and what was gonna happen and what had happened in the past. So very good. I liked that one a lot. And coming from the high, let's go down to the low. The worst book I read this month was The Gathering Dark by Christine Johnson. 1 star out of 5. Oh my god, this one took forever for me to read. I've been reading it since June. And I was finally like, I had a hard copy of it and I was like, I just want to finish this so I can donate it to Goodwill and never look at it again. So that was my motivation. I don't know when it came out. I think a while ago, probably early 2000s, and it's just one of those paranormal books about a girl that has some ability and some mysterious insta-love guy that's also a weird entity that's going to save her. Oh my god, it was so badly written and so awful. I hated it so much, but it definitely gave me some confidence in like, hey, what I've written isn't that bad, so maybe that's good news. And the last book is one I finished last night. I bought this on Amazon Kindle sale for $2.99. It's called Mothers on the Fast Track by Mary Ann Mason. It was written a while ago. I could tell by some of the statistics in there. It's nonfiction. I'm kind of at that point in my life where a lot of my friends are having children and I'm starting this really interesting career, and I'm starting to think, if I had children right now, what would that look like in my career, and would that set me back? And so that's why I kind of got this book. And I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was really, really interesting. A lot of great statistics and facts about women in the workplace, particularly on the fast track. The fast track, which is what the book's about, so like doctors, lawyers, people in those really, really high professions that really take up a lot of your time, and how they do it, if they do it at all. Managing, raising children, and you know, trying to rise up in your career, and like the obstacles you can face. So really interesting book. I recommend it if you're in your mid-20s to mid-30s and you love your job and you're thinking about having kids. It's a pretty interesting read. That's not a disclaimer for me wanting to have kids, because not anytime soon, if ever. So pretty interesting reads this month. I'm looking forward to slowing it down a little bit next month and doing some more fun reads, and finishing up The Presidents for my first quarter. I would give myself 4 years to finish The Presidents book, so this is the first one, first thing. So you'll be hearing me talk about Presidents for quite some time. And that's all I have. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll be back next month with what I read in September. Bye!